Welcome to our Let's Be Neighbors, where we talk about things that are important to the community of Utah. And we have a fantastic presentation for you today on housing, specifically on homelessness, the unseen neighbor. And we have some incredible panelists to talk with us tonight. First, we are going to be hearing from Shailey Ovard, who has lived experience with homelessness. And she is also the director. Let's see, I want to make sure I get this right. She is the director of the formerly Homeless Board of Utah. And beyond being incredible that we actually have someone who is willing to come talk to us about being homeless, we've talked with her previously, and she is willing to answer any question you have. Absolutely anything. And so if you have anything that you really want to know from a personal perspective, what it's like to be homeless, truth, like misconceptions, myths, anything you want to, she is willing to talk about it. So I would highly encourage to take full opportunity of that. And then after we hear Shailey speak, we have Sarah Strang, who is the Deputy Director of Crisis Services for the Road Home. And she will be talking about the direct contact and services that are provided. And then finally, we are going to hear from Wayne Niederhauser, who is the Utah Homeless Coordinator, who he'll get to talk to about it a little bit later, but it's a newly formed position, and he is the main point of contact for helping solve Utah's homelessness. And so with that introduction out of the way, I will give a basic housekeeping, and then we'll get straight into the presentations where we get to hear from our experts. And so we want to hear from you guys. So any questions you have as they come up, just type them in to the chat, and we're going to collect them all. And then at the last, after their presentations, we will get through as many questions as we possibly can, because we want you guys to have your voices heard and to ask questions directly here. And so if you have any tech issues, Kara, there is still an echo. All right, well, Kara Shaw will be able to answer any questions for you, so you can ask her or me, but we'll get straight onto the presentations, and I will try and solve my echo issue. So thank you very much, and go ahead, Shailey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Heather. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I know that we did a segment last year around this time as well, and it was really exciting to get to work with you guys. So thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly. And then, Heather, are you able to confirm if you can see my screen right now?
We're seeing us as a panelist.
Excellent. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
So we don't see your screen. There we go. And you're on.
Let me go back. All right. Thank you so much. So what I wanted to spend time talking about today was actually some of the things that I learned while I was experiencing homelessness. And it may not end up being the things that you would expect. So we became homeless right after my son was born. So he was born in September of 2015, and we became homeless in April of 2016. Before that, we did spend quite a while trying to make ends meet. And then when our furnace went out, ultimately we had to decide between electricity or our home. And because we were in the middle of the winter and we needed to make sure the kids were warm, we had to pay the electricity, which led us to homelessness. Some of the things that I wish I would have known so that I could have been a bit more prepared are things like shame. The guilt and the shame that you feel when you become homeless can often feel much heavier than the long list of action items that you need to take in order to overcome your homelessness. There were days where I was so depressed and so upset with myself that I ever allowed it to get to this point, and that my children were being dragged through all of this, and it was just such an embarrassing and really it was really depressing as a mother because you want so much better for your children and you feel like you're definitely not doing what you should be doing in order to provide that to them. There is something that Tara Rollins had said last year, and she had mentioned that some people really don't have the ability, to make the right choices. So a lot of times people will assume that you've made terrible choices that have led you to homelessness when really you just have to weigh your options, and neither of them is really the right way because ultimately we'd like to have all of our bills paid for. Hunger. Hunger is such a deep gnawing pain. It really is. And it can hurt so deeply. But what's even harder is watching your children go through hunger and knowing that there's not a single cent that you have to your name to buy them a meal. And so you have to cradle them and hug them and hold them and tell them you're sorry because you don't have any money for food, because you spent the last dime you had on making sure that you were still housed for one more night together in a hotel. And then the stigma of becoming homeless. So before I had become homeless, I would say that maybe I was a bit judgmental in a way because I had always looked at others and not necessarily thought I don't want to help them, but just kept going instead of stopping, instead of saying, are you hungry? Would you like something to eat? Can I get you anything? Some water? It's hot outside. There's so many things that I realize now that I could have done before that would have really impacted the lives of other people who are experiencing homeless. And so rather than just assume, that everybody is experiencing homelessness because of a poor choice that you made, or that they're a terrible parent because they can't shelter or clothe their children anymore. It's really sad that there's a stigma surrounding homelessness and people just assume. Now, my experience did include a drug addiction as well because of an injury I had received when I was younger. And that ultimately had led me, I guess it was kind of a snowball effect. So eventually we became homeless, and I was also addicted and homeless, as well as trying to tend to my children and figure out all of these other things that are going on. And I really don't think people realize the weight that you have on your shoulders when you become homeless. You are dealing with the stigma where people walk by or you can hear them talk about you, and it's never really anything good that they have to say. But no one ever talks about the trauma that the families experience or individuals who are experiencing homeless actually experience. And they don't talk about the torture that they endure, having to go to bed hungry night after night, not knowing when their next meal is going to be, and starving just so that you can spend another night in a hotel room so that you can all be under the same roof together. Nobody ever talks about that because I don't think that there's really anybody who has tried to dig deep and understand, which is why I'm really grateful that Wayne is participating in this event as well today, because I do feel like he has a solid understanding of homeless issues and how to overcome homelessness through a government level. And I support him 100%. Now, some of the things that I actually learned from becoming homeless. I would say the biggest thing that I learned was how to have compassion. So I had mentioned earlier that compassion is something that we really don't think about. I mean, sure, our heart bleeds for people when we see them injured and on the street or begging for money, but none of us really make that effort to stop and ask them why they are homeless. Why are you here? What has happened that has led you to this path? And when you experience such deep-rooted trauma that contributes to your homelessness, you're not only trying to treat homelessness, but you're also trying to treat that trauma, an addiction, if you have an addiction like I did, mental health issues. There's so many things that go into homelessness and overcoming it that a lot of people don't realize. It can end up taking its toll on you mentally and physically. And there were times where I wanted to give up because I felt like the fight was hopeless. I felt like there was no way I was ever going to overcome this. And I felt like my children were better off without me, and that I was such a terrible mother, even though I had such high hopes of being the best mom I could be. And yet we still ended up in that place. But I understand now that I had to go through everything I had gone through in order to truly understand the meaning of compassion and the meaning of humanity. And I honestly feel like the path that I led has brought me here so that I can tell my story and I can tell others that it is okay to experience such deep-rooted trauma, and that it is okay to feel these feelings and to feel like giving up. But there is hope, and I want others to understand that there is a way that you can overcome it. And it may seem a bit like you're walking in quicksand sometimes, because the weight of the steps you have to take in order to overcome homelessness may seem really daunting, and you may want to give up here and there, but I hope you don't. I pray that you keep going and that you keep trying your best every day, even if it feels like it's not enough. I truly feel like we definitely need more compassion. I feel that if people did have more compassion and understanding of homelessness as a whole and everything it entails, that they would have more compassion for their neighbors. They would check on them and make sure that they have a meal, a blanket, heat, lights, whatever it might be. There are ways that we can help our neighbors to avoid situations like that if we just reach out and make sure that we're checking on our neighbors. And, it absolutely costs you nothing to show compassion and to have a good heart and to understand that it may not always be bad choices that brings us to homelessness doorstep, but it can be that one tiny action that you make in an effort to help them that can completely change their opinion of humanity, their ability to keep pushing forward when they feel like giving up. And so I truly feel like everything I had gone through was meant to lead me here so that I could have a better understanding and so that I could reach out and help others as well. And then I do want to share with you just a quote that I thought was really beautiful. The nature of humanity, its very essence, is to feel another's pain as one's own and to act to take that pain away. There's nobility in compassion and beauty in empathy and grace in forgiveness. And then just to kind of wrap everything up that we just spoke about, let me stop sharing if I can. I am so sorry here. Is it still sharing my screen right now? Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay. The small things that we can do to really help our community would really to be actively involved in what's going on around you and in the community, and to welcome individuals who have experienced homelessness into your neighborhoods and to allow them to be a part of your own community and rally up to help these individuals because you may be the only person who does. Thank you, Heather.
Oh, thank you, Shailey, so much for your courage and your kindness. That was beautifully said and very difficult to follow up on, but we will go straight into zooming out just a little bit to a larger, more direct services with Sarah Strang with the road home.
Yeah, thank you. And Shailey, thank you for sharing your story. It's such a wonderful story. And I've been privileged to be able to work with our staff at the vaccination event over the summer, the superhero vaccination event, which was fabulous. And we know that anytime we're looking to get our young kiddos vaccinated, it's always a little bit scarier. And so it was really wonderful to be able to partner and do those things, and just for your wealth of experience. And so I have to say that's a tough one to follow up to as we're shifting that focus. Okay, so I'm going to be speaking briefly to the emergency shelters that the Road Home oversees, including the Midvale Family Resource Center, and talking about just some of the system changes that we've gone through over the past few years, the changes to the way that we're providing services and looking at the different components that we've done really in conjunction with Wayne and the state team and a whole group of folks that have come together for us to be able to provide more comprehensive wraparound services that we know both our families that are out at the Midvale Family Resource Center need, as well as the single individuals who may be accessing shelter in our shelter system. So with that, there are 4 areas of homeless resource centers that we currently have within Salt Lake County. The first one is the Gail Miller Resource Center that's located in Salt Lake City. It's operated by Volunteers of America, and it focuses on serving single women who are experiencing homelessness and are over the age of 18. There's the Men's Resource Center in South Salt Lake. That one serves single men who are over the age of 18 and serves up to 300 individuals. And then the Midvale Family Resource Center, and that is located out in Midvale, and we serve families who have kids with them. And the Geraldine King Resource Center, oh my gosh, I mixed up my things. How funny is that? Gail Miller is actually a co-ed men and women facility serving 40 women and 160 men. And Geraldine King is the all-women, single women facility ran by Volunteers of America. So as many of you know, this was a huge shift away from having one centralized location downtown into these different facilities, with the goal being able to provide more targeted services to the folks that were experiencing homelessness so that they would be able to exit their homelessness and have it be brief, rare, and non-recurring. We know that families and single individuals alike all do better when they have their own home and their own place to be. A congregate shelter is never somewhere that we want to have folks be. So we want to work as quickly as we can to get them housed. So what's different about these homeless resource centers? So there's a lot of different components that go into that. So one of the big pieces we have is how meals are provided. So at the single adult HRCs, they're served 3 meals a day, a light breakfast and then a lunch and a dinner. We do that in partnership with Catholic Community Services, who does an amazing job of bringing these meals on site. And we have a team of folks who are in our kitchens every single day serving meals to the gentlemen and the women who are at the single adult homeless resource centers. But the truth is we couldn't do it without the community, because our kitchen is reliant on volunteers that are coming through and working on different components with us every single day. And it's a really wonderful way to be able to come into the facility and engage with the folks who are there with us. COVID has been a very trying time for a variety of reasons, but one thing that was very difficult as we've gone through the pandemic was not being able to have volunteers on site, as we were worried about infections and those different infectious diseases and the ever-changing guidance. And so we're thrilled to be back to having volunteers on site, because we couldn't do the services that we do without them as well. So, and then at the family shelter, we again are very privileged to partner with the community. We frequently have folks who will bring down meals that have enough servings in them to serve everyone who's in the facility. So within the family shelter, families are provided with food storage. There's 6 different kitchen spaces that families are able to go in and cook meals that they can prepare for their family. And we have an on-site pantry that folks can go into, and they can choose from whatever is in the pantry. It's through a partnership with the Utah Food Bank to be able to cook for their families. We know that all of our kids and each of our unique family structures like certain things. They want to be able to eat the foods that are comforting to them. And so we want to be able to provide a space for the family to be able to have something that is unique to their family and what their family needs within that. Coinciding with that, and I'll talk about this a little bit further down, but we also have folks on in the facility on a regular basis from the Department of Workforce Services. We want to get folks connected to everything they need to be able to provide the food that their family likes to eat. I don't know about you guys, but I know with my daughter growing up, there were several foods that were off the table, absolutely not something she was going to eat. And there were foods when things were really hard that she really wanted. And we want to be able to support the families in being connected to the benefits that are provided through the Department of Workforce Services and through the state of Utah so that they can offer those same exact things to their families. Each of the facilities have on-site storage. It looks a little bit different for the families, just as we go through and we have ebb and flow to be able to accommodate the size of the family. But at the single shelters, everyone is given a large storage container and a smaller tote at their bunk. For the families in the shelter, they're given a tote for each person in their family unit. A huge shift that we've made over the past few years has really been targeted in case management. We know the need of being able to connect folks to services in the community. We know the importance of being able to assist someone in their housing journey, and we know we need the staff on site to have that happen and have it happen in a quick way. So our case managers are very housing focused, and they work to connect the families and the singles individuals that we serve back to community resources. We want to connect them to resources that they can keep using when they are no longer at the shelter, so that they don't feel like the shelter is where they need to be coming to only receive those services. We want to connect them back to where they can be within their housing area of choice. And then I can't say enough about our partnership with our state partners. We also partner with a variety of different treatment services, both substance use and mental health, looking at what we can do to connect folks who may be struggling in either of those ways and arenas. And I think, Shailey, you spoke so eloquently to how multifaceted this problem of homelessness is and how we need to be able to support in each of these arenas, and acknowledging that homelessness was not something that someone deserved to have happen to them or happen because they didn't work hard enough. It's something that is a situation that they're currently in, largely because of exactly what you said. You're faced with choices. What am I paying for? Am I paying to fix the water heater? Am I paying my electricity bill? Am I going to choose to go and buy some groceries or pay for this hotel room for one last night because congregate living is challenging and hard? And that's really the very truth of it. And we know we need those services wrapped around. And then specific out to Midvale, but school liaisons. Our school liaisons do so much to make sure that our kids are connected back to their school of origin or to a school that is linked into the neighborhood surrounding the shelter, but also can be looking at the community that the family is moving into. So just really quickly, the Gail Miller Resource Center, again, serving single men and women. Right now, because of the COVID, we're really looking at focusing on folks who are over the age of 60. So if you're over the age of 60 and presenting to a shelter, we're looking at what can we do, how can we help get you to a resource that is appropriate for your age and in a non-congregate facility if possible. It has 200 beds for a total of 160 male and 40 female. And this fiscal year, which goes from, actually it's not June 1st, so it's July 1st through the end of November, we've served a total of 484 single men and 153 single women at that facility. And that's located in Salt Lake City. So at the Men's Resource Center, this is located out in South Salt Lake. We have a really wonderful partnership with the city. We're grateful for being able to have such strong advocates that we can collaborate with. That facility serves single men over the age of 18. I also feel that way about Salt Lake City, by the way. I guess I should have said that too. But we are serving single men over the age of 18 there. And in this facility, it has 300 beds that are broken up into 8 dorms. And again, it's a pretty distinct difference. So at least you've got some smaller dorm areas where the men are grouped together versus having it be one open, large dorm area, which is definitely a more trauma-informed approach, and we know makes our guests feel more comfortable. And this year at that facility within the road home, we've served 991 single men at this time. And then the Midvale Family Resource Center, that is a facility that is located out in Midvale. We serve families and their children, so whatever makes up the dynamic of your family, we come in to support. It's 300 beds, and one thing that's specific to the family shelter, is that it is a larger dorm area. Within that, it is definitely something that we know is challenging for our families, and we're constantly looking at and evaluating what it is that we can do to help that area and the facility and that dorm style work better and function better for our families. So on a monthly average, we serve about 110 families. The length and stay of the families really just depends on each of their individual circumstances. And this year so far, we've served 259 families, which is a total of 955 individuals, of which 549 are under the age of 18. So really seeing the impact that has to our children, and we feel very strongly that every child deserves a home, every family deserves a home, and that is a goal that we want to ensure happens. And again, that one is located out at Midvale. And then we also have a couple of components of emergency winter overflow that are happening. One is St. Vincent de Paul overflow. It happens through the St. Vincent de Paul area down on the downtown facility. That is a building that we partner with Catholic Community Services on. We also have the Wiegand Center Overflow, which is operated by Volunteers of America right now. That program is up and going. And then just most recently, in the past few weeks, through a partnership with Salt Lake City and many, many folks who came together to make this happen, the High Needs Hotel program, which is in partnership with Shelter the Homeless and 4th Street Clinic, has opened. Each of these programs will close on April 15th, but we're excited to be able to have them all up and going as we're heading into some of our colder winter months. And that is our emergency shelter systems. And I couldn't see how much time I took, so I don't know if I took too much or too little or not enough.
You did absolutely perfect. And again, if we get to more questions and answers, that's fantastic, and no one's going to complain if we end early. No one ever complained about a meeting that ended early. All right, so
I do see that Tiffany had a question. Are we answering those now, or do we want to wait until the end?
If you want to answer it right now, feel free.
Okay. So her question was just about children under the age of 5 told about the Salt Lake County's free Parents as Teachers program. So Tiffany, we are really great about providing a lot of information to our families. We give them out flyers and do those different components. We're in the process actually of gathering feedback from our families, specifically around how we're conveying information. I'm definitely sure that Shailey could share her experience about this, but when you're going through this process and you're getting all of this information coming at you at one time, that also can be overwhelming. So we're working with the best way to disseminate that information, not only for while they may be in our facility, but also for once they return to their own individual housing option.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Oh, here, let's see. Yeah, we're going to do a little bit. We're going off the fly right now, so we'll just answer this question as well, since it applies to you, Sarah. What are the number of clients served in emergency shelters at Weingartz, St. Vincent's, and hotel shelters?
So I don't have those numbers with me currently, so I couldn't speak to that. But if that is something that, maybe we could get your information and follow up with you on that question. I just don't have it with me at hand, and I don't want to misspeak. And with emergency shelter, when we're looking at the overflow primarily at St. Vincent, that style, it's open from 7 p.m. until 6:30 a.m. where folks can come in and get mats for the evening and somewhere to stay out of the elements. And we do not have case managers on site at that program. However, we do at the High Needs Hotel. So that one's being done in conjunction with 4th Street Clinic, and we're really looking at providing both housing case management in addition to medical support as well as needed. So that program has both of those components.
Wonderful. All right, so keep the questions coming, and we will get to those at the end. We're going to transition now to the biggest scope we have of the state of Utah. And with this is Wayne, and I'll let him take away with any introductions he wants to provide because he's kind of the point man for homelessness in Utah right now.
Thank you very much, Heather. I guess everybody can hear. Let me get sharing.
And if you want, we can start asking some questions. Wayne, if you want to email us the slides, we can share it from our end, and then we can just click through.
Okay, let me see if I can do that.
All right, so we can try and get to more of the chat questions. One that I had that was sent to me privately was, are all homeless individuals unemployed? So whether Shailey, if you want to answer from personal experience that, or...
You know, it's funny because that also would be associated kind of with the stigma, because a lot of times people think, you know, if they're homeless, they weren't able to manage their bills, or they lost their job, or they were unemployed to begin with. There were many people that I knew inside of the shelter who were working hard every single day. There was one gal that had 5 children in the shelter, and she was a single mother. And she had to rely heavily on people within the shelter, like her friends or people she had met along the way, in order for them to be watched by somebody while she worked. And it took her 8 long months to get out of the shelter. And she was working full time and was even working when she had actually entered into the shelter. A lot of people don't realize that well, most people right now, especially, are living paycheck to paycheck. If you are forced to stay home, let's just say, for example, with COVID, because you've been exposed or whatever it might be, you'll be home for a week, but then you start developing symptoms, and then you're home for another week, and then another week. And eventually, you're not getting paid for any of this time that you've had to take off. And so a lot of people don't realize how close most people are to becoming homeless. A lot of people are one paycheck away from becoming homeless.
Is there anything else you want to elaborate on that one, Sarah? Well, we're almost
Yeah,
we're almost good for slides.
No, you're good. I just didn't want to start if Wayne was ready. But I will echo everything that Shailey is saying. It is many people who are experiencing homelessness are currently working. And we know that in order to achieve housing at all, much less affordable housing where you're not severely rent burdened, far exceeds what many of the wages that folks are being paid. And so that is a huge component as well as we look at that. The other piece is that majority of folks who enter the shelter, roughly 80% of them, tend to have ended up experiencing homelessness because of one key event. That could be their car broke down and they didn't make it into work. They ended up losing their employment. They therefore then couldn't pay their rent, and just this snowball effect that can happen and can take place within it, and looking at each of those components. So
If I could add on to that just for a split second, a family member of mine makes a little bit more than minimum wage. And if she makes sure that she is there every single day for work, then she makes just enough to cover her rent.
Very sobering.
and I think, Shailey, that just really highlights the situation that your family ended up being in, where there was enough to cover all of these basic necessities, but once it went outside of that realm, you were left making very difficult choices.
All right, Wayne, just whenever you say to the next slide, I'll just click it over.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Sarah and Shailey. Tremendous stories. It's stories that I get to hear weekly. in this position as homeless coordinator for the state of Utah. And it's heartbreaking. Sometimes it makes you want to cry to know what the human situations are out there. And it's a very human situation, homelessness. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide.
Can you see it okay?
We're just seeing the first slide.
Interesting. Okay. On to the next one. But
Heather, you have to push enable editing, I think.
enable editing. Okay. There we go. And tech issues all around. All right.
Okay. Yeah, the next slide, please. Okay. So the State Office of Homeless Services and the State Homeless Service Coordinator, my position, was created in the 2021 legislative session, that's last year, in House Bill 347. It also created the State Homeless Council. So this is the first time, it's not the first time we've had a committee working on homelessness in the state, but it is the first time that we've made homelessness a prominent issue in the state by creating a separate office for homeless services. And the emphasis of the statute, what we're supposed to be doing as an office, as a council, and me as a coordinator, is coordinating the services across the silos of government, health and human services, corrections, the public safety, coordinating all these in one single effort. And the members of our council are from Health and Human Services, from DPS, that's Division of Public Safety, from Corrections. We have budget people on that council. It's a kind of a star-studded council to really now focus on making our homeless systems better. We're going to be working on policy and funding through the legislature. Just for your information, I've been in this position since April. When I was asked to do this by the governor, he didn't do it because I was an expert in homeless services. And I think a lot of us think that we know what's going on and what it means to experience homelessness. But I can tell you, I didn't. I had no idea. And it's been a bit a steep learning curve for me over the last 8 months. And I'll tell you a little bit about that story in just a minute. So the governor really picked me because of my experience with the legislature. Many of you might know I served in the legislature for 12 and a half years from 2006 to the end of 2018. And for 6 of those years, I was Senate president of the Utah Senate. Let's go to the next slide. So because of my legislative background, I am an expert in policy and getting things funded, and have done that for many years. So I see our objective is to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. And those aren't my words. I think they were originated with HUD. That's the United States Housing and Urban Development. But I believe that those words in their briefness really tell us what our objective is. But we're not going to reach this objective until we really understand. And Shailey's lived experience is one story that helps us to understand what the systemic problems are, how people get into homelessness, and what we can do to help them get out of that situation. Let's go to the next slide. So this is just my definitions. There are some official definitions to homelessness, but I've discovered that we really have two subpopulations. And you can break it down any way you want, but this is the way I've compartmentalized my analysis. One is situational or acute homelessness. This is individuals or families kind of living on the edge, but they're making it. And then there's an event, as Sarah had mentioned, sometimes multiple events. It's a car repair and you can't get to work, or you've used your last dollar to fix your car and now you can't pay your rent or your house payment. It's a health incident. And, you know, we used to have health insurance that had deductibles around $300. I remember it being $100, but now we have $5,000 deductibles, $10,000 deductibles, and people get into a health situation, and it's easy to rack up a $10,000 bill. And most people in this situation can't make that payment. There's a collection process taking place. And if this family, this individual doesn't have a safety net of family or friends around, they can very easily end up homelessness. But what I've discovered is not that it's easy, but many of these people move through the system pretty well. Our systems work well. The systems that Sarah described, getting people back on their feet and back in a job training so they can make a little bit more money, finding a more affordable housing situation for them. But we are having a greater problem today because we've had such appreciation statewide. There isn't a community that hasn't felt the appreciation of real estate and the increases in rents, house payments, and so forth. The other subpopulation that I want to highlight, and I don't want to try to lessen a very human situation, but I call it a chronic homeless situation. People that have been living in homelessness for many, many years or multiple years. But we have people that are unsheltered or who are in our shelters that have been homeless sometimes for decades. And they're also experiencing mental health issues and substance abuse issues, substance abuse disorder. And those things keep people in a homeless situation, unable to process, unable to cope, like many of us are used to coping. They're not able to do that. They're in a cycle that they can't get out of. And so this is where I kind of want to tell a little bit about my journey to understand what experiencing homelessness is all about, particularly the chronic homeless. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, I'll use that data in just a minute. So when I got into this position, knowing that I'd be working with the legislature, using my expertise for budget and also for policy, my biggest weakness is I needed to understand. And so every week, my wife and I, we visit with a community of people that are homeless, and community is a really important element of individuals experiencing and families experiencing homelessness. Community is a key for them, and we visit with this community every week in Salt Lake City area. There's a lady that's been doing outreach with this with this group for probably about a half a dozen years. And now every Friday night, we visit with these individuals. We know their name. We have become their friends. There's always a meal offered. And my wife is a thrifter. And so she goes through all the thrift stores and gets blankets and sleeping bags. And just having some dry clothes or a dry sleeping bag will make a huge difference for somebody. But what I discovered early on was that, yes, people came and they enjoyed a meal and they got some personal items like toothpaste and so forth, and maybe some dry clothes or a clean pair of socks or something like that. But they came mostly because this lady that has been serving them for years loves them and has compassion. And they come just to get a hug from this individual that we've been working with now. And we now have been able to participate in a more intimate way with this group. But it's been so enlightening to me to understand what it means to experience homelessness. And as Shailey has well articulated, it's usually trauma. Some trauma in your life has got you in a situation. And if your resiliency is not high, you can find yourself struggling with that issue. These individuals and families, I experience more individuals, so I'm kind of focused more on that population. But these are our veterans. These are individuals that have never really known what we know and what it means to live like many of us live, because they've been in intergenerational poverty. It's domestic violence. It's people coming out of incarceration and they can't find a job or any place that they can rent because they can't afford it or because they have a record. And then this pain, this trauma that's being felt is then mitigated oftentimes by substance abuse. This is all kinds of different drugs that people can get on the street. This is alcohol addictions, and then not being able to process, struggling with not just the trauma that got them into the homeless situation, but the constant trauma that you feel living on the street. You know, especially if you're a woman living on the street, you can only imagine what trauma you might face day after day. And people get to a point where they just have given up, and because they can't seem to get out of that spin cycle, so to speak, of homelessness. I'm going to go now to also, I just have to say that the Office of Homeless Services for the last 2 weeks has also been helping at the Weingartz Center because of some staffing issues. COVID's been a real challenge for our providers, getting enough people to staff our resource centers, especially our overflows, that one of which Weingartz is one of those overflow shelters. And so I spent 2 nights from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. at the Weingartz Center helping out. And that was also an amazing experience for me. The population that is near Weingartz, which is a lot different than what I experience every week in another part of Salt Lake. It's just there's so many people that I know have some mental health issues. And I think we're, a society, if we haven't crossed the threshold of crisis, we're really of a crisis, we're really close to a crisis for mental health. And so many of the individuals and probably some family members of a family do experience some kind of mental illness or trauma that they've experienced, and it makes it very difficult to function and to process. The group that I meet with every week, there isn't a person I know there that doesn't have high anxiety, PTSD, kind of related type of anxiety, and many of them don't want to go to shelter. But I can't hardly blame them, because being in a shelter when you have high anxiety and being in a room sleeping with, I don't know, Sarah, is it about 50 people in a room? That trips all kinds of triggers for people, and they just want to get out of that situation. And so, having permanent supportive housing, which I'll talk about in a minute, is going to be a key issue for us going forward. But here's just some data points. We have 90% of the individuals enrolled in our permanent housing projects either have exited to a market rate housing or retained their permanent housing, which shows that housing can be a big help to anybody getting out of homelessness. We have almost 17,500 unduplicated people that experienced homelessness in 2021. And on a single night in January last year, there was counted in the shelters and outside 30,565 people. So there's a lot you can read into this data, but one thing I read into it is that there were 17,500 people that experienced homelessness, but on any given night, we have about 3,500, which means that people are experiencing homelessness, but they're also getting out of homelessness fairly quickly. Our systems are set up to either they are able to find some family or some friends to get back into housing or some help that way, or they've got help through our resource centers or other great providers across the state. But it also indicates to me that if somebody was easy to be housed, they're probably in housing. And the people that are left in our shelters or unsheltered, living on the streets of Salt Lake City or Ogden or St. George, are the most difficult people to house because of the trauma they've experienced, mental health, or addiction issues. Let's go to the next slide. So housing is a key to anybody that is trying to heal from the pain they've experienced in their life. Being in a safe place where your stuff doesn't get stolen or you don't get abused. Being in a place where you can, stabilize your life. But people are not going to be able to do it alone. And so housing with case management and services is key. And you leave out the case management and the services, housing isn't going to be successful for most of these individuals. Let's go to the next slide. So what are the action items? Well, first of all, the State Office of Homeless Services and the State Homelessness Council are working on a new strategic plan for the state. And that's going to inform us, I believe, on some direction that we need to take. But it didn't take us long to realize that housing is going to be key, and we're not waiting for that. strategic plan to finish in order to get some housing money. So we were successful in getting $228 million in the governor's budget. This is the first time we've even come close to getting that kind of money put toward affordable housing. 50 million of that will be for rural communities, and 50 million will be for a loan program. And then there's going to be 128 million for deeply affordable housing. Now, getting in the governor's budget is one thing, but you also need to get it past the legislature, and that's what we're working on now. We also want to focus our attention on mental health treatment. This is things like assertive community treatment, our ACT teams. The downtown ambassadors do a wonderful job. I could tell you a lot of stories. We don't have time for that. And then building healthy communities. West Valley City has a new program called My Hometown. If you get a chance, you might want to look that up. And they're having amazing success building community and resiliency in the community, a community that rallies around families, individuals, and helps them keep their housing, and also creates some very strong resiliency, as Shailey also communicated to us earlier. My last slide is just people that we need to bring together. These are our key partners, and it's going to be a partnership. We're going to have to work together. It's an all hands on deck issue. And I believe we can make some tremendous progress. Not that we haven't been making progress, but I think that we can take some big steps now going forward. That's working with our councils and our coalitions, our providers, our cities, counties, the philanthropic community, business, the legislature, the general public, and private and nonprofit housing developers. That ends my presentation, and I look forward to questions, and just it's a thrill for me to be here with and sharing this panel with Sarah and Shailey.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me again? I tried muting myself through an alternative way. Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys so much. It was incredibly insightful in so many levels of this very multifaceted issue. And so we are at 8:03, so we're going to jump straight into questions. Let's see. And I will start collating them since I was a little bit blind in the slide sharing, but we do have some. Let's see. Why are so many people still living on the street in tents when there are so many emergency shelters for them to go to? And this is open-ended for anyone that wants to take it.
I kind of addressed that a little bit in my presentation, and this is informed by my experience with people that are living unsheltered. The top answer that I get from people is that they feel like there's too many rules in shelter. But what I sense from them more than that answer is this high anxiety that they have felt from whatever pain they've experienced in life, these traumas and the ongoing trauma that you experience surviving living on the street. And so being very anxious, and sometimes that's informed too by things like meth. Being in a shelter is just tripping all kinds of triggers mentally for them. Even when we meet together as a community every week, there are a lot of those individuals that only feel comfortable being there for a short period of time before they feel like they need to leave. And just because of these anxieties they have felt. And so at least that's what I've experienced. That's what I've heard from individuals living unsheltered. But they also mentioned that they would sure love to be in an appropriate housing situation for them. But it won't be a congregate shelter. that they would like to be in, like a kind of a studio, and even I think there's been I think Pamela Atkinson did some kind of a survey of people, and even where you didn't even, if you have a congregate bathroom, but just your own little place to sleep. This is the SO, is it S?
It's the SROs.
SOR, yeah, okay. Even that would be something that would be acceptable for a lot of individuals. And
this
families.
I'll echo what Wayne is saying, and I saw a question that came through earlier about the tiny home village and those components. And one of the things that we frequently hear from the individuals that we're serving is the need for this diversified portfolio of options, that they can have a housing option that does work for them. And Shailey can absolutely speak to the challenges, I'm sure, of congregate shelter living. It's very hard. It's very difficult. And that definitely can be, a deterrent for some folks as you're looking at that. And so I guess, Shailey, maybe I would toss that over to you to hear your experience.
So in my experience, it was difficult making the initial leap, going from, not spending all of our money on a hotel room to finally making that jump to going to the shelter. Because when you have really small children, you're just really not sure what you're going to experience when you do finally get into the shelter. And if you want children to be able to go sleep on time, it's very, very difficult, as there are many other children who are either running around screaming, or, maybe their parents are showering, and so they have rule of the, the cot for now. There's so many different things that kind of coincide that people don't really understand. A lot of it for me was the commotion. So much around me, so much going on. I felt like I had no privacy for me and my children. Like if I were to have to breastfeed or something, it was kind of an uncomfortable situation, with my son being so young, going into the restroom to do that versus staying on my cot. And on top of that, there's just so many things that compound one another. So I was experiencing addiction as well. And so my main concern was, I'm going to go to the shelter and I'm not sober yet, and I'm going to end up kicked out. And then what do? Then we have no option available, which is what, ended up happening later on. And it definitely needed to happen. I needed help. I could not continue to tend to the children when I could barely get up out of bed to tend to myself. And I think the biggest thing that kept me from going to the shelter was that fear of eventually having nowhere to go because of my own, addiction and my inability to connect with these resources to help me get sober.
Shailey, I'm going to piggyback on that and have you continue your story, if you will. We have two questions that tie in directly with that. Is, for in your experience that you saw around you, what were the resources that you found most challenging to access? And how do you believe that could be help for people in the future so that they don't have to experience what you did? And then kind of tying into that is, how did you actually end up getting out of your situation so that you were no longer homeless?
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. So for me, when I was living in the shelter, I wanted so badly to just communicate to my case manager, hey, I have an addiction. I need help. Please help me. I need to find out what I can do so that I can get better and be the best parent for my children. But then the other side was really fearful that if I were to indulge this information to them, that it could potentially come back on me in a negative way where, they're going to take my children. I'm not going to see them for a very long time. I can't afford to get into a rehab center. So what am I going to do to show them that I'm trying, And so for me, it was really difficult. And then finally, when I had gotten kicked out for paraphernalia that I had totally forgot I even had in my bag, I got kicked out. In order for my children to still stay at the shelter, they had to stay with my ex-boyfriend, who was their father. And then he had a warrant that he had not taken care of, and I wasn't at the shelter with them, so I had given them my cell phone. They ended up taking him in because I guess they had mentioned to him several times that he needed to resolve it. And I was calling like crazy the cell phone, trying to get a hold of him, finding out, that they had taken him into DCFS custody after they had arrested him. And so it all worked out the way I know it was meant to work out, because I know I would not have been able to tend to these children any longer in the condition that I was in, and that something had to change. But literally 2 weeks before this happened, I had reached out to my doctor for help instead of to my case manager, who I was deciding still on whether or not I should disclose that to them. And then um, when I finally overcame homelessness, it was through a lot of trial and error. I came up on 3 different housing programs and the lists, but then after submitting all of the information, I was still denied the services. And so it was really kind of exhausting. And I had made the decision then that I wasn't going to wait anymore to try and get this help, and that I was going to try and make steps towards overcoming my addiction. I completed the DCFS, case in 6 months instead of over a year's worth of time, because I actively went and sought that help. And then after that, I had made the decision to um, live with my grandmother, who was gracious enough to take us in, because at that point I was kicked out of the shelter. I didn't have anywhere to go. I wanted the children back with me. And I'm so sorry I'm taking up so much time, but eventually I had landed a job, which that was the biggest thing for me because of my criminal background. I mean, there were times where I would do things on purpose just to get off the streets, to get out of the cold, so that I would no longer have to be out there in the cold, sleeping under a freeway overpass, with windburn on my cheeks and just a total wreck. Uh, but I feel like everything happened for a reason, because I wouldn't have found my strength that I had within me to overcome these things even without the assistance, even though I still feel like there's many situations where people do need that assistance. They do need that extra little bit of help to get them going on the right path.
Thank you, Shailey. All right, we're not quite into the lightning round yet, but we'll go into the moderately fast answer Q&A. Is it helpful for us to give money to people on the street asking for money, or is there something better we can do to help? Because they're very visible, but you also, yeah, go ahead, Shailey. This is open to everyone. Go.
I'm so sorry. I was just going to say, honestly, it's better for you to show them compassion. Ask them if they're hungry. Ask them if they would like your Big Mac that you're not going to eat, or would they like a Big Mac of their own? These things that we really don't think about that hurt so deep, that is the better route. I would say, if anything, to offer them a meal, or just offer them your ear so that they can hear you, or I'm so sorry, so you can hear them tell their story, and they can provide, what's weighing them down, and that will help them.
Shailey brings up a really great point. When for example, the other night when I was at the shelter, and when I'm with people that are experiencing homelessness, I make it a point just to stop and acknowledge them, listen, talk to them. They feel, one of the biggest complaints is they feel invisible. and when you recognize them, when you get to know their name, when you acknowledge someone, it's a big boost to them. So on Sunday morning, when the shelter was closed and people were living, I had communicated with an individual the night before, and I'll just use a different name. I'll say his name was Ted. But Ted and I had a long conversation about his life, and I'd built a little bit of trust with him. And when he left, I said, Ted, thanks for sharing. It was good to see you, and thanks just for being here. And his eyes just opened really wide, and he, you could tell that touched something inside of him. And there was another man that I'd also spent some time with that just brightened up. You know, they come in with a pretty sad face. There's great challenges living on the street, but when you see a face brighten up because you've spent a little bit of time with them, that makes a lot of difference.
I would say, really just piggybacking off of both of those, I think asking is a really important component. Frequently to get to work, I get off on 13th South, and there's almost always someone there on that street corner. And a couple of weeks ago, I started rolling down my window and saying, hey, here's what I have. And then asking them, what's most helpful for you? What is it that you need during this time? And I've gotten a variety of different answers that have all been very interesting. And so I've got a little stockpile of items that I can give out now as I go through. Hand warmers have been a really big one that have come up, especially as we've gone into these really cold months, and those different components. So sometimes it's that they're hungry and it's a granola bar. Sometimes it's hand warmers. It really just varies and depends, and each person is unique in where they see their area of need.
So many of the individuals that I know that are living unsheltered have some pretty severe addictions. And so money can be a problem for them, buying alcohol or drugs. So we've learned that we sometimes give out Smith's gift cards, but we'll do about just a $10 gift card, just enough maybe to buy a sandwich. One individual gave a gift card to, said, oh, great, I'll buy a chocolate milk, and I can't remember what else he wanted. It was kind of his favorite things. And so, offering, Sarah and I think Shailey both said, are you hungry? Would you like something to eat? It's a big deal for people. And we hand out these gift cards, but not a lot of money, because sometimes they'll trade them for other things also.
All right, so there is something I did in my research that tell me, so anyone of our panelists, if you can go through and say if these are valid suggestions for people, like what could be useful if in the case that any of our participants don't want to give money. Tell me if you review these, if these are valid. This was someone who said they were at one point homeless, and these were the things that they found to be exceptionally valuable. So I will put those into the chat as we answer. Okay, so there's round one for that, and then it won't let me paste all of it, so I have to do it in 2 rounds. Okay, so just as you can review those, and we'll get to another question, is for services, are there studies or case studies, past or present, from different states, so from other places, are there that have helped with mental health challenges, and are any of those being implemented or considered for Utah's homeless population?
This is something that we're going to need a lot more resources to address. Not just for people experiencing homelessness. We're finding this in all populations. The mental health issues that people face, and and a lot of times, specific to the unsheltered population, they don't believe they have a mental illness. It's called Anastagnosia, and I put in the chat a TED talk. It doesn't look like it's linking, but I think you just, if you look up Dr. Xavier Amador and listen to his TED talk in Orient Harbor, he talks about it's fascinating, and it has been very informative to me in my experience and how I communicate with people that are facing some kind of a mental health situation.
I also will say I do think there's some innovative things on the horizon, not necessarily pertaining specifically to homelessness, but that they are seeing success with in other states, primarily around drop-in centers and access. So the Huntsman Mental Health Institute is in the process of creating the mental health drop-in center. Davis County has created a drop-in center for substance use that are alternatives for law enforcement to be able to take folks to those different components as well. So there's some exciting things that are happening in the community for sure. But I agree with Wayne. It's definitely solutions and things that can be implemented will definitely require a lot of support.
And two multifaceted questions that are I'm kind of conglomerating about 3 or 4 questions, and hopefully I can catch all of the facets. Regarding housing, like shelters itself, do shelters we have at present satisfy the need? Are there people that are turned away because there isn't any room? And with all of these empty buildings in Salt Lake County, is there any way that those can be accessed? How about shelter itself as a whole?
Well, I can just briefly just say that I think there are people that are being turned away, but there are a lot of people that do not want to come into shelter at this point in their life. And I want to emphasize at this point, because my guess is there'll be a point, and we just need to be in a situation to capitalize on that when they're ready. But when our resource centers, our shelters are full, that makes it very difficult. And the reason why, there's multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons that shelter is so full is we don't have a lot of deeply affordable housing. And that's why we need to get this $128 million so that we can create more deeply affordable housing so that they don't have to be in shelter. Shelter is supposed to be temporary. It isn't a long-term solution to anybody's situation. And I think Sarah would agree with that also.
Absolutely. I mean, as with any system, you're looking at inflow and outflow as that's happening. And so when we see the type of housing growth that we have seen, and not the same level of growth for affordable and deeply affordable housing, you start to see some stagnancy that happens within that shelter system because we're not seeing the type of outflow that we need to see to be able to keep the system balanced. And so we're incredibly excited to see the governor's budget and the recommendations and the work that Wayne and his team have been doing on those different components, and that we know that deeply affordable component is something that we absolutely need, and it will be key to ensuring that we can move folks through the system quickly.
Where is that budget for, and what in the legislative process, is there anything that participants can do to help support that, or where is the budget at for approval? We can't hear you, Wayne.
The legislative session just got started, but it's a short legislative session. So they are going 150 miles an hour through in these committees. Our request is in the Social Service Appropriation Committee. If you go on the legislative website, le.utah.gov, you can get a lot of information, look up committees, look at the Social Service Appropriation Committee. And then if you know people on there, or if your representative is on there, reach out to them and express your support for the deeply affordable housing ask. Right now, we're working to get that rated highly in that committee. And then there's a group called the Executive Appropriation Committee at the end, who takes the priorities of all the committees, and there's always more money. There's always more asks than there is money. And so they're the ones that end up deciding what gets funded and what doesn't get funded. So next Friday, the Social Service Committee will decide priorities. I hope we're rated highly, and then it will be a much easier job to get it through executive appropriations.
And I did put a link in the chat there, and I hope that's the correct one. So if anyone wants to correct me and double check on that one, so anyone that does have their representatives on that committee have that option available to them. And let's see. We're going to turn to the last kind of section that I've been holding off for the end, is how can people volunteer? There were multiple very interested people. Let's see if I can get the exact questions of is there, let's see, about SLC programs and about financial literacy opportunities for someone like me to get involved with that. I understand this is a large gap in the general population, but I know homeless folks would embrace this topic as well. Where is the greatest need for volunteers? And I know there was another one, but is there basically how can we best help?
So I will say, specifically speaking to financial literacy, there was actually some really interesting pilot programs that came out recently in a conference through DC that they were doing that really were focusing on financial literacy with families and a couple of components around there. So we're definitely seeing some evolving research that's coming out of those different components, and it's absolutely something that we look to how we can bring that in locally and what that looks like, when you're in shelter, but then when you're out of shelter. We want to make sure that we're connecting folks outside of shelter as well, so that they can continue to sustain their housing. And then my last piece would be just, if there's a service provider that you're aware of in your local community, go to their website. They'll usually have a volunteer tab, whether it's Catholic Community Services, Volunteers of America, the Mission, the Road Home. Each of them have some really great, Crossroads Urban, there's some really great opportunities.
So Pamela Atkinson, I think everybody knows Pamela. She's been the face of homelessness and advocacy for many, many years. We meet quite often, and we've talked about a mentoring program. But mentoring people in this situation is not easy, and it will take some training. And so we're working on potentially getting a mentoring program started, because we know that as much as we need case management and just people that can kind of help and listen, there probably won't be enough. And having some volunteers do that, but you would need to go through some training because it's about building trust. It's about sometimes accepting that you're going to be frustrated at times, and that you might hear some words you don't want to hear. There's a lot of things that you're going to experience in that mentoring situation, and again, it's not easy, but if you build trust and spend some time with it, I think you can really make a difference. So anyway, we're working on something like that, and kind of stay tuned, but we would we'll make that very public when that opportunity might come available, if that's the right thing to do.
Another question that came in the chat is, can you talk more about the deeply affordable housing and how we can support this funding with the legislature?
So the deeply affordable housing, this will be a grant program, a competitive grant program. So developers and nonprofit organizations, this would be some providers who are wanting to have housing in their portfolio. There's some providers that really make some sense for, and it will require some matching. So that matching can come from a county or a city. The money could be used by private organizations if they do a deed restriction on the property, or it could be, in a nonprofit situation where it's permanently going to be deeply affordable housing. But one of the elements that we're going to be looking very closely at all those requests that I'm sure we're going to get is that they need to have a plan for case management. And that's key. It's key to successful housing. But please, reach out to your legislators and just say you support that and would love them to support it. Again, you can find your legislator on le.utah.gov. And there's so much information there. There's calendars. You can look up bills. You can get on and watch committee meetings virtually. So you spend half an hour just kind of perusing and getting familiar with that website. That's where you can get connected to legislators that are on specific committees or just legislators in general.
Awesome, thank you. And I apologize to this participant. I missed a set of questions by them. So if you don't mind, we'll answer a couple of these. Is where are we in the timeline for the tiny home village process? And are there ways people can volunteer their skills to tutor or help homeless find a job or learn a new skill? Is there a need for that?
Well, I'll address the tiny home community question, and then let others do Sarah or Shailey address the others. So it was announced last summer with Mayor Mendenhall. This is the Other Side Village. They're a nonprofit in Salt Lake area. They found a location out on Indiana Avenue towards I-215. It's some property there that used to be a garbage dump, so to speak, but not the whole property. So there's part of it that they cannot build on because of it being a site for a refuse, and they're now they want to be. They'll be probably one of these requests for the 128 million. So that's why moving the tiny home concept forward will be it'll be critical that they're able to tap into this money that we're trying to get through the legislature. I think the Planning Commission in Salt Lake City has already agreed to it, and now it's a process through the city council, and it will take them some time to get it permitted. But I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. It's a money situation more than it is anything. And that's, again, why it's so important we get this deeply affordable housing money through the legislature.
And then I'll just say really quickly, because I'd love to hear Shailey's perspective on the training and those different components from her perspective. But we do currently have a couple of partnerships. Some of this has been put on hold because of COVID and the ebbing and flowing that we're seeing in our community and in our facilities. But we have partnered, again, in partnership with Catholic Community Services and in conjunction with Intermountain, and they actually have a chef who comes on site to the Gail Miller Resource Center, and the residents can sign up, and they'll do a series of classes with this chef. They actually cook some food and they'll bring it by and you can eat it. And it's quite wonderful. And that when they're done with this class, they get a food handlers and a safe serve permit, so that they're then able to go and take that and gain employment in the community or through Intermountain. So we are seeing some of those components happening. In some ways, it feels like the last 18 months, it's been a real pause on some of these exciting things that were coming together in the resource centers. So we're excited to get back to that.
And then, in my opinion, I think because I had dropped out when I was younger, I was really missing out on education, which really kind of prevented me from getting a good paying a job. In order for me to afford an apartment right now, I mean, thankfully, I don't have to work multiple jobs. I was able to actually find a job willing to allow me to work and to kind of show to them what I'm capable of. But not everybody can find jobs like that. And in fact, they are a needle in a haystack. And so I do believe that it is extremely important that if we are to help these individuals to overcome homelessness, we also need to think about the barriers that may stand in their way from being able to successfully either own or rent a home of their own, to where they're not going to end up back in the system or unable to pay for things and unable to afford things. And so I do feel like maybe education or job training would be extremely beneficial for people to kind of connect with. And so I am excited to hear more about these various programs that Sarah had mentioned.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to give you an opportunity for any last final thoughts to wrap up your feelings on this, and then we will wrap up. But I want to end with you guys.
I think I personally would just like to say thank you to Shailey for coming and sharing your experience and having that lived experience voice at the table. It's difficult to have and to find, and you do such a wonderful job at articulately telling your story. So just thank you for coming and being here and being vulnerable to share your story in such a great way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And if I can give anything back, if it's just, my experience, I will do it. But ideally, I would love to provide a lot more back to the community so that people don't experience the same hardships that I did unnecessarily,
Just being able to understand is key. And Shailey, I think, has exhibited that tonight, having the courage, as Sarah said, to tell her story, but understanding people's stories, understanding, what's happened to them. It's not what's wrong with somebody, it's what's happened to somebody, and being able to understand that, and having somebody be able to tell you that, and is a good first step into building trust and helping somebody get to a better place.
Thank you so much, all of you. And thank you for coming and listening for all our participants. A recording of this will be made available within the next few days, and it can be shared. And we just thank you for being here, and we will see you next time. Thank you all.